Welcome to Commander Central, episode 279, and today we're taking a look at Patreon supporter Brian Hansen's Olivia Voldaren Steel deck. I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
Chris, happy Monday. How are you doing today? How was your weekend?
Long, tiring. I did so much work on so many people's stuff this weekend. It was too much.
Because you're helping some friends move.
Already helped them move. I helped
Okay.
them put in a mailbox randomly. My buddy's wife hit a pole with her Denali, so we ripped that apart.
Oh, no.
Yeah. No biggie. I mean, we were both, trained in on that bodywork stuff and fixing all that stuff, so we ripped it all apart. He had parts ordered in, so we put it all back together, and it looks brand new. So that's awesome. What else did I do? See, I cleaned my garage. I played basketball with my kid. I just, so much stuff.
Very, very nice. Have you picked a modern deck for your tournament coming up?
I think I'm playing Burn. I sat and talked with one of my teammates, and we discussed the fact of how the meta's running with a lack of life gain in any decks. The big decks are running Cascade cards, so they're having free spells, and Roiling Vortex is being played in the sideboard of the decks. And since I don't care about anyone's game plan, I'm just doing mine, and they can't really stop me. It's probably the best situated Burn's been in a while. So I think that's what I'm going to end up playing on Saturday.
And I mean, you've been playing Burn forever, so this is just like riding a bike for you, probably.
Yeah, it's super easy. So we'll see. I'm going to play tonight, get some games in and see how it feels. And, it's all about where the numbers are at. That's what I need to figure out.
Gotcha. Well, good luck, because that tournament is coming up shortly, right?
Yep, the 7th of August, so this Saturday.
This Saturday. Well, we'll hear hopefully a bit on it in a couple weeks from now when we have you back from that.
Indeed.
If anybody out there wants to reach out to us and tell us what modern decks you're going to be playing in any sort of modern tournament, how would they do that, Chris?
So you can find us on a multitude of social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can search us up on Facebook, CMDR Central. You can find us online at cmdrcentral.com, and you can also find us on YouTube by searching CMDR Central.
And you can also head over to patreon.com/CMDR Central and check out our reward tiers, such as a Decks You Play show, or just join our community to chat with us and play virtual EDH.
Yes, indeedy. And I'd like to say thank you to everyone who does support us. It is awesome. We love you all. And, just hitting us up, send us little messages that makes our day. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes, just hitting that thumbs up button on your podcasting platform or YouTube goes a long way, and we thank everybody who just listens or supports us on Patreon. Well, should we jump into Brian's deck, Chris?
Sure thing. Best color combination in Magic.
Yet, on today's show, when that just aired, you admitted green is the best color.
Color? I didn't say combination, though.
True. Okay.
Ooh,
well, it's missing the best color, so does it, honestly, is it the best?
See, green's just a cheaty color, in my opinion. I mean, I don't know. I think someone up in Wizard's Chain, maybe it was old Dr. Garfield himself said, you know what, we need to break one of these colors and see if anyone notices. And he picked green or something. I'm not sure.
I just see the meme of you see an island and then you see a forest and it's what's the difference between these two pictures? And the person going, it's the same picture.
Oh, no.
So we always send out some questions to our listeners when we do these deck techs, and Brian has answered. So what did Brian have to say?
So usually our first question that we shoot out there is, we need to get a feel for what the meta is. So we know exactly where to push the deck. Like if you're playing CDH, we need to push it that way. If you're playing, Kitchen Tag, a little casual, we need to be like, oh, well, you don't need, those ABR duels and stuff like that. So we reached out and the exact wording was, my meta is, and a whole bunch of periods. And I got to say, all these notes, Brian, I loved them all because I got a good kick out of a few of them. So all these decks that Brian did were built during lockdown, the missing year of all our lives and everything like that.
Yeah.
So he hasn't had an opportunity to play any games, in the game store, and he doesn't really have a play group. So he normally does draft or sealed and big into cube. I mean, I like cube too. Cube's really awesome. So, I mean, more power to you. I don't know a whole lot of people who have cubes anymore. So if you got one, if you're ever in our neck of the woods or at a GP or something that we go to, if those ever come back, I would be willing to come play with you. So other than that, he just says he hasn't really had, an idea of what the real meta is where he's at. And as he says, he's not sure if that's very helpful. So for me, Brian, with this deck, I just took it as a deck as a whole and decided to just build it as is. So that's how I'm going to approach this for you.
Yeah, I did this similar when looking through this. I kind of built it as if I was going to play this myself in our shop or out in the wild at Magic Fest if they ever return.
Yep.
The next question is that we always ask is what's the goal of the deck? And Brian said it has a few goals. The first one being ping opponents' creatures to turn them into vampires and then steal them and then make Olivia big. The secondary plan is to use active treason effects to steal his opponent's creatures to attack and then sacrifice them. And then the final way is to give Olivia Death Touch for removal via her ping ability.
Yep, which is a lot. I gotta say that.
Yes.
I'm gonna say that right now. That is a lot of things going on in a Rakdos deck that, Rakdos is the best color combination in my opinion for, because I like to attack. I like to do other random stuff, In those aspects, it's really good. But in the overall aspect, when you're running so many moving pieces, it doesn't have the support pieces for it. So then that's going to be the major issue with this deck.
Yeah.
So the next thing we reached out, we ask is weaknesses and areas that need to be focused on. And, the biggest one that everyone tells us is win conditions, because, a lot of people don't really see what the win condition is aside from just beating face with creatures, which is always a viable game plan in my opinion. So Brian doesn't see a real great way for this deck to win. Olivia can be easily removed. There's a Torment of Hailfire in this deck, but, you may only play that once or twice. Brian's trying to make friends. So you don't want to cast it repeatedly. Also, he wants to know, is the deck too broadly focused? Well, like I said, I think it is. The Death Touch pinging should be fun, but is it parasitic? Should sack outlets take over and keep the steal and sack theme? All those, things are all good ideas, and as we get into this a little bit more, I'll show you the route that I decided to take. We also ask, stuff about like budget restrictions and everything else like that, and he says, he wants to avoid taking out a second mortgage, which I got a huge kick. I was reading these notes the other night and I started laughing, and my wife looks at me, she's like, what are you laughing about? I'm like, these notes are awesome. I love them. So we'll tweak stuff. I will keep it reasonably priced. There will be maybe a few of them that are a little bit higher dollar cards, but they fit the theme really well. But there's not going to be no, $700-800 cards thrown in here. So you don't got to worry about that.
Awesome. So he did have one other note about the mana base. He has the tools, just needs to integrate them. So I think with that, let's read Olivia, because I had to read this one a couple times because I forgot what it did.
This is the weird Olivia that everyone says that the art's all screwed up on too.
Yep, the missing leg.
Yeah, she's floating with a missing leg, but her knee's up in the air, and they're like, where did her leg go?
So Olivia Voldaren is 2 black and a red for a legendary creature vampire with a 3/3 body. Olivia has flying and 2 activated abilities. The first one is a generic mana and red, and Olivia deals 1 damage to another target creature. That creature becomes a vampire in addition to its other types, and then you put a +1/+1 counter on Olivia. Her second ability is 3 generic mana and 2 black to gain control of target vampire for as long as you control Olivia.
Evil Olivia.
3/3 flyer for 4 with some cool abilities. That's efficiently costed, I think.
It is. It's very efficiently costed.
So, let's start with the land base. Chris.
So there are 35 lands in here. 36 if you include the MDFC card that's in here. But I'm not really going to include that because we're already at 35 lands. So 34 to 35 is really good in a Rakdos deck as long as you can keep the curve low, which, looking it over, the curve's not super low in this deck. So the 35 mark is pretty good. So we have Blood Crypt, Bloodfell Caves, Canyon Slough, Dragonskull Summit, Evolving Wilds, Field of the Dead, Mortuary Mire, 12 Mountains, Rakdos Guildgate, Shizo Death Storehouse, 12 Swamps, Temple of Malice, and a Terramorphic Expanse.
That sounds like kind of in his notes. He probably has the lands at home to make this a better mana base, but this definitely is a great starting point.
It's a perfect starting point.
What are your thoughts about Field of the Dead there, Chris? I think that's where we should start since it's one of our favorite cards.
I like Field of the Dead in decks. I really like this as well. Due to the simple fact of the way that I want to change this deck going forward, I need those extra tokens and the incremental value that it will gain you. Now, in order to run Field of the Dead, I think we need to cut down quite a bit on the basic lands. So we're going to have to run them down to probably about 8 of each or so and add in extra lands, just to make it more efficiently usable type of, per se.
Yeah, 100% agree. In my opinion, I like that number 8 of each. If you really want to get fancy, you can do 4 snow basics of each and 4 regular basics just
Yep.
for another trigger. That's what I do I don't do it in Regnant Crowd because that is one of the decks I run Field of the Dead, but all my lands match in that deck, so that's just more of a OCD thing versus a optimization thing.
Agreed. I do like, Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse. We're going old school with this. I'm not sure if I would run actual fetches, just due to the simple fact that in black and red, the good amount of card draw that I want to play anyways, or that someone else would want to play within black, costs you life, along with a lot of the good abilities. And, you're not running a huge lifelink package, so I'd rather be playing these fetches that can, ease how my lands come in rather than pinging myself type of deal.
Yeah. So what lands would you add to the deck, Chris?
Let me see. So I would add, this is the high dollar card that I thought of immediately for this deck. And yes, it's a little expensive. I think it's like $100 and some odd or something like that. But that is a Voldaren Stronghold. Now, Voldaren Stronghold reads, it comes into play untapped. It's legendary land. Add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. Now, for 1 colorless and a black, you tap it. Put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. Now, I chose this for the simple fact of I want to stick to the steal and sacrifice theme. And in order to do that, you may have to sacrifice your own creatures to get the ball rolling, so why not have something that can recur those creatures as well? And that would be probably the highest dollar card that I would add to this deck, per se.
Yeah, that is a great way. It kicks that little reanimator effort off. But yeah, that's pricey, stupid reserve list.
It is. And at least it's a cheaper of the reserve lists, and it's probably something that you could trade for. Not to mention, Brian, if you have been playing for a long time, you probably have one just laying around because people don't realize that it is on the reserve list and has gone up in price. Because I've seen a lot of people bring in their collections to sell, and I'm like, yeah, we'll take that card, and I give them a price, and they're like, why is it so high? I'm like, well, that's just, that card's really expensive. So that's, it's something to take a look at, see if you have one just hiding around.
Gotcha.
The next thing I would do is I would definitely put in more duels. Like you have the fetchable one from Return to Zendikar or whatever that comes into play untapped. You control 2 or more basic lands or something like that. I'd play that. I would probably play the snow one. I think it comes into play tapped though. A Bojuka Bog is always nice in this deck. The other thing to think about is you could be playing Cabal Coffers. Cabal Coffers just received a reprint, so it's easier to get your hands on if you don't have one. So, something that you can put mana into if need be. And if you go the Cabal Coffers route, then you're going to want to play the Urborg route as well, which Urborg also just received a reprint in the Time Spiral set, so there should be plenty of copies of both those cards floating around in the world.
Yeah, those were the top 2 on my list, and the reprints bring their price down a little bit. I think Cabal Coffers is finally bouncing back, but my thought behind it was the fact that Olivia's ability, her second ability is 3 black. Being able to, hopefully net 10, 12 mana off of a Cabal Coffers, that lets you activate it twice. You can gain control of 2 things, not just one.
I mean, you could consider Cabal Stronghold as well, if you want to be on more of a budget-friendly version of it, and maybe even consider both of them. I mean, because you are playing Field of the Dead, so we're discussing cutting 8 lands out, so you could swap in 8 of those other lands. Would be no real issue with that. Yeah,
the issue with Cabal Stronghold is it cares about basics, and Urborg doesn't turn them into basic swamps. It just turns them into swamps. Reads? Yes.
I've never played the card, so I don't know. I just hear everyone talking about it. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, add black for each basic swamp you control.
Yeah, gross. Yep, don't play that card. Trash card. Don't like it.
I have a couple other suggestions along your Voldaren Stronghold suggestion. I like Phyrexian Tower in this deck. You can sacrifice creatures to create some mana. It comes in untapped. It's just a solid card, which also has recently gotten some reprints from Jumpstart and a couple other sets.
Yes, that's true. That's pretty good too. I mean, there are quite a few really good cards, land-based that you could put in here. You have stuff like Witch's Cottage, which you can return stuff. You have your Ghost Quarter land removal stuff. I don't know if I'd want to play Scavenger Grounds per se in this deck because there's too many things that you would want to be playing with your graveyard as well. But Bojuka Bog for sure, as I had mentioned. There was a new one. It's what's called Witch's Clinic, I think is what it's called. And I think it gives your commander lifelink. I wrote it down.
Yes, Witch's Clinic, 2 tap target commander gains a lifelink until end of turn.
Yes, and that wouldn't be bad because, Olivia's a 3/3 to begin with. So worst case scenario, she deals 3 damage, and you gain 3 life. But the ability to ping and then put a counter on her, plus give her lifelink, I mean, just enough to keep the ball rolling type of deal would be nice.
Yeah, you mentioned a few others on my list, the Ghost Quarter, Field of Ruin type cards for land removal, especially because knowing that I was building this kind of for how, if I were to play it, I run Homeward Path in all of my decks, and if you're stealing stuff, that is definitely a land you don't want sticking on your opponent's battlefield, so those are ideal if you have a lot of if you run into Homeward Path when you start playing at the shop or online or something.
Yeah, because Dana suggests that all the time to people, so if you ever play with any of our group, people through the Slack, on Spell Table or anything like that, I guarantee people are playing that card.
Yeah, my final 2, first, because I kind of am taking this, I took it more as like Vampire Tribal, just because I like to turn in creatures sideways and beat face. So Path of Ancestry is a dirt cheap land. It comes in tapped, but you can make mana of any color, and as long as the creature, you spend it on a creature that matches your commander's creature type, you scry.
Yes. Which a lot of vampires are really good for, the deck as is. Because you got to fill out those little slots here and there anyway. So that would probably just be good even if you don't run tribal, because you're already in black-red, you're turning things into vampires, so why not?
Yeah. And my final one is High Market, just another way to sacrifice stuff after an act of treason so they don't get it back.
Yep. Always a good card. I haven't seen that card in quite a while, though.
Yeah, it doesn't get the same love these days, I think. Let's see when it was last reprinted.
Commander set.
Commander 2021.
Yep.
And in the Forgotten Realms Commander decks. So, I mean, it gets reprinted all the time, I guess.
Oh, I love it.
Anything else on lands, Chris?
No, seeing how you're in Rakdos is really easy to just have a very basic land base. So it's pretty nicely set up as is. Maybe a Rogue's Passage. Maybe. Because you have a Shizo in there, so Rogue's Passage could be another outlet for that to give, your commander or something else that's big, the unblockable portion of it. Especially if you're stealing something huge, like say you steal someone's Kresh who's like a 30/30 or something like that, and you can give them unblockable and smack someone for it. So, I mean, that's always something to consider if you are being a theft-style deck.
Yeah, 100% agree. Okay, Chris, where should we move to next?
Wherever you want to move to. Let's just not go anywhere where there's lots of sun, because, me and sun don't get along this year.
Are you still crispy?
No, not anymore. I mean, I got a nice tan going on, but there was a while there for like a week after, like even after I peeled and all that, if I was outside in the sun too long, my skin would blister again. It was pretty bad.
Gross, but yes. Well, instead of going outside, let's move over to the artifacts section.
Okay, so we have 8 artifacts. We have a Basilisk Collar, Chaos Wand, Expedition Map, Lightning Greaves, Mimic Vat, Soul Ring, Talisman of Indulgence, and Whisper Silk Cloak. So first thing I see right here, right now, is there is a huge lack of any type of mana accelerant in your artifacts, which, Rakdos has an issue with mana acceleration. That's something you might want to consider. The other route you can go is one that I was thinking about going. I didn't quite get all the cards in that I wanted to suggest to you, so it's more that you'll have to go digging for, but lower the CMC down. Because the lower you get the CMC, the less amount of mana rocks you have to play. So that's one of the routes you could go.
Yeah. This deck does have an average CMC of 3.34, I believe.
Which seems low, but looking at it, there's quite a few 4-drops, quite a few 5-drops and stuff like that in here.
Yeah.
A couple of X spells. So, I mean, you want to be able to have that mana to put excess amount of mana or cast double spell per turn. Like, when we talk about average CMC, like, say, my burn deck in Modern, the average CMC, I think, is like 1 point something or another. Well, if I have 2 lands out, then I can cast usually 2 spells per turn. So if you're thinking average CMC is 3.5, well, I need 7 lands out to cast 2 spells per turn on average, which is a lot in a game if you think about it. That's turn 7 at the earliest if you're playing this type of deck without any mana accelerant.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Mana rocks are something I would put in here just because we're in Rakdos. You don't get the benefit of ramping in the traditional sense. So, Arcane Signet has just been reprinted. That's a couple bucks. Rakdos Signet is $1 or $2. You can go pick up a copy of that. Just adding maybe 2 to 3 more mana rocks, I think would help this deck a lot.
Now, I like adding mana rocks that have a another incremental value to them, such as your Commander Sphere, your Mind Stone, stuff like that that you can get, a draw off of it if need be, if it's late game, so it's not a dead card when you draw it as well. So that's another thing to consider when you're just slapping mana rocks in here is don't go straight for the ones that are extremely efficient that everyone's running. Look at how the deck plays and feel out where you need to fill in those gaps.
Yeah, great point. So Basilisk Caller is in here to do the combo, the pinging with Olivia.
Yep.
Brian asked, is it too parasitic? Dana has his Gliss of the Traitor Death Touch tribal deck, and he has the Verdian Longbow staff of whatever combo in there that, essentially machine guns the table down. I wouldn't say it's parasitic, but you definitely know it's coming. And
yes.
So I think it's fine as long as it's not your main game plan, because you're just going to clear the board. You're not dealing damage to a player, so you're just getting stuff out of your way to block. For blockers.
You gain 1 life every time it deals the damage, though, too, because
True.
Olivia gains the lifelink, which isn't enough incremental to really turn the tide, because, you are playing in a 40 life type of format. So in other formats, it does. This one, not so much.
Right. But I do like the card. It's, 1 mana, 2 to equip, and you get Death Touch and lifelink. It's just a solid artifact.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on Chaos Wand? For those who don't know, Chaos Wand is a 3 mana artifact, and it has an ability for 4 mana and tap. Target opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile an instant or sorcery. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then put the exiled cards that weren't cast this way on the bottom of that library in any order.
I honestly don't like this card. I wish it read target player over target opponent, because then you could target yourself to guarantee you're going to hit one of your Act of Treasons or a really powerful card, because you know exactly how your deck list is set up, and cast it for free because you don't lose the other cards. That's one of the reasons I don't like it. Now, if you were playing in a meta where you're playing against a bunch of spell hungry decks, then this would be pretty cool to do it against other people. But I don't think it fits the game plan. I think it's kind of just a cute what if card type of deal, and I don't like that.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe if you had a meta, or in your meta you run into a lot of spell casting decks, cool, I'll cast your Chaos Warp so you don't get to type of thing. But you aren't going to know that till you start playing with people or online.
Agreed.
So Chris, are there any artifacts you want to add or talk about?
I would like to see a Shadow Spear put in here, honestly. The biggest reason for Shadow Spear, aside from, it gives +1/+1 trample and lifelink, blah, 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 it's 1 mana, equips for 2, really efficient, is the ability that permanents your opponent's control lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So if something has, protection and you want to steal it and sack it, then you can go for it with something like this. So those little things like that are extremely powerful.
Yeah, Shadow Spear is just a powerful card, and I like that a lot in this deck.
Yep, I also wouldn't mind seeing like Swiftfoot Boots and a few of the other ones that protect. Like you do have Lightning Greaves, a Whisper Silk Cloak, anything to try to keep your commander around, because your commander is one of your recurable stealing outlets, is something that I would look into.
Yeah, I like Swiftfoot Boots a little better just in case you do need to target Olivia for whatever reason. Like, having Greaves and Whisper Silk Cloak are great, but they give shrouds. So you really gotta make sure you put stuff on in the right order.
Yep, I agree with that. I've had that issue before. I'm like, oh no, I can't do this.
Okay, Chris, I think that wraps up the artifacts. Should we jump over to the instants?
Instants disappeared on me, but yes, we can go to instants. I have found them. They're so fast, I found them. So we have 8 instants. We have Abrade, Blade Brand, Doomblade, Electro Dominance, Fling, Rakdos Charm, Terminate, and Village Rites.
So, Abrade destroys an artifact. That's always good.
Yep, or 3 damage.
Blade Brand is another way to give Olivia Death Touch, and you draw a card. Doomblade, just a great removal spell. Electro Dominance. This is a fairly recent one, and by fairly recent I mean like 3 years ago. X red for an instant. Electro Dominance deals X damage to any target. You may cast a card with converted mana cost X or less from your hand without paying its mana cost.
It's a very nice card. Yes, I have seen this played. I've never actually used it, but I have seen this card played.
I've seen it played, and it wrecks me every time I see it played, because you aren't casting this for 5 mana, you're casting this for 12 mana. You're putting 10 into that thing to drop, your game-winning card essentially out of your hand.
Yes, I agree. It is nice. because it deals damage to any target, so you can put it into someone's face, especially when you're playing Dana and he sits at 1 life for the entire game and then wins. So little cards like this will save you and stuff like that. I do like it as, a gotcha card. It is very cute. Now, seeing how I think there's 4 cards in here that are X casting cost, you want to limit how many are in here. I take that back. There are 3 in here that I see. So you don't want to run more than, usually my opinion is 2 max, because you don't want to jam too many cards in there that you have to put excess amounts of mana into.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think these X cards need to be kind of backbreakers, and I think this is definitely one of them.
Yes, I agree. Now, the card I want to talk about most in here is Village Rites. Now, instant speed, 1 mana, as an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature. Now, the whole deck, as the theme is how I wanted to go with this, is I want to steal stuff and I want to sack it. But if I sack it, I want value for the sacrifice. So there are many cards that do this. There are 4 of them that are at instant speed or sorcery speed that copy what Village Rites does. You have one of them already in the deck, so the other 4 are Altar's Reap, Costly Plunder, Deadly Dispute, and Skull Tap. They're all 2 mana, and they allow you to sack a creature to draw 2 cards. Deadly Dispute allows you to get a treasure out of it, and one of them I do believe allows you to sacrifice an artifact or a creature to do it. So, you have other outlets as well just to draw cards.
Yeah, Costly Plunder is that one.
Okay. So, I like that aspect for the card draw for this deck, so I kind of wanted to pull away from the red card draw, which I always force everyone into, that I love to play, and the other good black card draw. I'd rather be, try to streamline this deck and focus it on doing one thing for sure, and that is to sack and steal. Sack and steal and just have fun all day doing that.
Yeah, I love all those instant speed sacrifice. It's just double dipping, it feels like. You're sacrificing something you already took from your opponent and you get to draw the cards.
Yep. Because, yes, it does come down to the point where you're going to look at it okay, do I attack and force them to block? Or do I sacrifice it? And honestly, since a lot of these are instant speed, you can do both. You take it, you attack, see how they block, and then sacrifice the creature if they, block funny, and just I'm going to kill it either way, and I get through for some damage and then draw cards.
Yeah. My only suggestion here, for instance, is a Chaos Warp. I know that's kind of, a staple, quote unquote, but it gets rid of any problem you have.
I agree. Chaos Warp, Feed the Swarm Sorcery. I don't remember anymore. Cause I have a playset of them and I've yet to slam them into any decks, and it's been kind of bothering me.
Feed the Swarm is a sorcery, but yeah. I'm surprised you haven't put that in Mogus yet.
Mike, that deck is so chock full of stuff, it's so hard to do. Another one that you could consider too is Kolaghan's Command. So Kolaghan's Command is 3 mana instant, and you get to choose 2. One is return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, or target player discards card, or destroy an artifact, or it deals 2 damage to target creature or player. The big thing is, it is an artifact removal, deals the damage, or you return a creature from your graveyard to your hand. Usually you don't force someone to discard, but I have seen it used that way. Like you could force yourself to discard, and then you reanimate something or do something else like that. So that is something to consider. The overall versatility of the card is really good. It's pretty much, biggest thing is to return a creature from the graveyard to your hand.
Yeah, Kolaghan's Command is so good. Is it still super expensive? No, not anymore.
I don't think so. I think it's like a $15 card or something, probably still.
Around there.
It's just because it's only seen, technically 2 printings, because one's from the list, but it's only seen 1 actual printing, and where it circulated heavily.
Yeah. Any other instance, Chris?
Well, there is another one, but it's extremely expensive, so I don't want to suggest it. But honestly, if you have bought the commander decks as of recently, you should have a Deflecting Swat. So Deflecting Swat would definitely be one to put in, because that was another protection spell to protect your commander, or to just, choose new targets for the ability. So if you go to cast something and they're like, no, I'm going to kill this, and you're like, well, then I'll Deflecting Swat quick and I'll move the target over here or something like that. So something along those lines or whatever,
Yeah, Deflecting Swat is so good.
It's really expensive for what it is. But since it was recently printed, and most commander players that I know end up picking up commander decks, there's probably one floating around in your stuff.
Yeah. Change the target of spell or ability. Ooh, and copy it. Ooh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Really good.
Okay, let's jump over to the sorceries.
Sorceries. We have many sorceries. Sorceries are slower, so I could find these ones. So there's 18 of them. We have an Act of Treason, Bankrupt in Blood, Blasphemous Act, Bond of Passion, Diabolic Tutor, Grave Upheaval, Grim Tutor, Hijack, Carry Zev's Expertise, Mark of Mutiny, Nightbird's Clutches, Portent of Betrayal, Read the Bones, Song Mad Treachery, Tentative Connection, Tentacle Collection, that's what I was thinking. Torment of Hailfire, Traitorous Greed, and Unwilling Recruit. So a lot of these I see already are your Act of Treason effects.
Yeah, that's what I think of. More than half of these are.
Yep. The one other card that you did have in here that was similar to the Altar's Reap and all that, but it's in Sorcery's Bankrupt in Blood, which is, sorcery speed to do that. Same thing as what Skull Tap is, except for this one draws 3, which is phenomenal. I love that you get to draw 3 cards for sacking someone else's creature. That is awesome.
Yeah. So when I was looking at these, I tried to find maybe a little bit better versions of these Act of Treason cards. So the first one I found was Besmirch. It's 1 red, and it says, until end of turn, gain control of target creature, it gains haste. Untap and goad that creature.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a little bit better than Carry Zev's Expertise based just on the list today, because Carry Zev's does the same thing without the goad, but you get to cast a card with CMC 2 or less from your hand for free. There's not a lot of cards for 2 or less in this deck.
That is true. Yep, unless you change the deck overall to kind of fit that lower sub-theme like that, or lower CMC, then probably good replacement.
Yeah. The fact that the creature gets goaded, so let's say you don't have a way to sacrifice that creature you just took. It's goaded until the end of your next turn, so that means it has to attack and it can't attack you.
Yep, which is really good too, because if you steal, even if you don't want to sack it, you steal someone's massive beater or something. We'll say, this last week we talked about Voltron. So if you steal someone's Voltron commander and you swing with all that, then you goad it, it forces it to swing at someone else. So then it's just like, well, you just saved yourself a turn from getting nuked out by that commander.
Yeah, 100% agree. And then other things I would suggest here are the typical black card draw, your Knight's Whisper, your Minions Murmurs. This is one where you draw X cards and lose X life equal to the amount of creatures you control. And there are a lot of creatures in this deck to begin with. There's 24, 25 counting Olivia, plus whatever you end up stealing with your Act of Treason effects.
Yep, I agree with that. The biggest sorcery that I wanted to suggest to put in here, and I have no clue what the price is of this card right now, and Dana's not on the show, so I'm totally going to slam this one down because you need to play it. It's called Insurrection, and I would definitely be playing this in a steal and sack deck per se, because it fits theme. It's not like you're just doing this because it's in red and I should just be playing this card. No, it fits theme, and why not just steal everything? I mean, that just seems perfect, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is, it does have that reputation of being the card that you can sit around and do nothing all game, spend the 8 mana to cast Insurrection and take everybody's stuff, and then you win the game that way. But the fact that this is a deck that revolves around stealing creatures and sacrificing them, I love this as a finisher. I don't think this is a deck where you are going to be sitting around doing nothing. So, you know what, if you cast it, you cast it. But at least you're probably progressing the board state throughout the game anyways.
Agreed. Yep, I would definitely, aside from that one, I would definitely try to stick within your 3 CMC theft cards. Maybe a 4 CMC one, because there's a few of them that are pretty good. If you steal, you get another effect with it. But I wouldn't go over the 4 mana at, maybe 1 or 2 of. Try to keep the curve low, because like I was explaining earlier, you need to be able to cast more than one spell, especially if you're stealing and you don't have an instant speed, or not instant speed, but a free sack outlet. You need that extra mana to be able to sack that creature.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I like the 3 CMC ones. If you go above 3, they have to do something for you. That's why I like Traitorous Greed, because you get 2 mana back.
Yes.
From that. So you're essentially paying 2 mana for it, and you get 2 red back.
Yep. There's a 5 mana one called Active Aggression. It's technically only 3 mana because you have 2 Phyrexian, but it is instant speed. So that is something to consider too. You could do a little bit of instant speed shenanigans to do weird little, I'm going to block and kill your creature and all that fun jazz. So that's something to, think about. Another one is Mass Mutiny. Now I'm going to look up all the sets that this is printed. It's printed in Plane Chase, Commander 13, Planechase Anthology, and Explorers of Ixalan. So it's definitely got some printing so you can find it. But for each opponent, gain control of up to one target creature that player controls until end of turn. Untap those creatures, they gain haste. Now this is only 5 mana, so it's like a baby Insurrection. So you can get one of each. And then if you have some of your sack outlets out there, you can just sack them off. So that's definitely something else to think about, because you can take everyone's great big creature away from them and maybe even just win the game that way.
Yeah, I like Mass Mutiny. Like you said, it's a baby Insurrection. I like that it hits each player. So you're, 5 mana to get essentially, hopefully 3 things is really good.
It also doesn't target like the rest of them. So because it just says for each controller, or for each opponent. So you're not targeting an opponent per se if there's any sort of weird shenanigans that they could have like that.
Right. I mean, it still targets the creature, but yeah, you don't target the player.
Yep.
How do you feel about Grave Upheaval, Chris? This is a 6 mana sorcery that returns target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, and it gains haste, and you can basic land cycle for 2.
It could be something to consider just because of the basic land cycling. I'm not quite sure if I'm sold on it. I mean, 5 mana is a lot to do, only one thing, but you are taking, because right, you're taking it from their graveyard.
A creature from a graveyard, so anyone's graveyard, for 6 mana.
For 6 mana. I mean, it's not bad. I mean, it's definitely something I would consider playing. I'm not sure if it fits quite where I want to be, because I want to try to lower the CMC overall, but it's definitely something worth trying.
Yeah, I would like to hear how this card works from anybody, just because I've never really seen it played, and I agree, 6 mana to get one thing back at sorcery speed seems, you're really risking it there, I think.
Yep. I mean, because there's quite a few of them that are up in, the 4 and 5 mana mark, to do stuff like that are really good. So if you want to keep it up high like that, and like you feel like you like casting the big spells and only casting 1 per turn, make sure that the spells have a bonus effect to them. That's the best thing you could do.
Yeah. Any other sorceries, Chris?
Nope, no sorceries.
Well, let's jump over to the enchantments then.
So, mighty enchantments. There are 5 of them. We have Aspect of Gorgon, Bastion of Remembrance, Dictate of the Twin Gods, Outpost Siege, and Retreat to Hagra.
So, Aspect of Gorgon is an aura that gives the creature +1/+3 and Death Touch for 3 mana, 2 and a black. Bastion of Remembrance is 2 and a black, and when it enters the battlefield, you make a 1/1 human soldier token, and then whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. So a little bit of a Zulaport Cutthroat on that. Yep. Dictated Twin Gods, 3 red for our enchantment with Flash that doubles damage dealt to a permanent or player. Outpost Siege, 3 in a red to essentially impulse draw your deck at the beginning of your upkeep. But I bet this mode, he uses the Dragon's mode. Whenever a creature leaves the battlefield, Outpost Siege deals a damage to any target.
Yeah, that could definitely be an out for that. I honestly would probably rather have the card draw over that.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's recurable quite enough, and you're not making a bazillion tokens that you can just sack off and, deal like 20 damage to someone. It's only 1 damage, so I don't think the value is there to do it that route.
Yep. And then Retreat to Hagra is 2 and a black for an enchantment with a landfall trigger, and you can choose either target creature gets +1/+0 and Death Touch until end of turn, or each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. I'm pretty sure this is just another way to give Olivia Death Touch.
Agreed. So actually, I would probably cut probably all of these, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Even Outpost Siege, maybe. I mean, I'm kind of torn on that one just because of the impulse of it. But I'm not quite sure. That one I'm not sold on either way. But I would definitely be putting in some awesome little black enchantments. And how about we start with Phyrexian Reclamation? Phyrexian Reclamation lets you pay 2 mana for a return. I think it's 2 life, 2 mana and 2 life.
Yep. 2 mana, 2 life.
And then return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. It's a 1 mana enchantment. So this sets up the ball if you ever have to start stacking off your stuff, the way that I was describing how I wanted to set this deck up. So then you can recur them. Another one is Vampiric Rites, which is a sacrifice outlet. So when you're stealing stuff, you can pay 2 mana, sacrifice a creature, you draw a card, and you gain 1 life. So something else that you can use to, sack things off that is recurable, because it's going to stick around in the battlefield, because a lot of times people probably aren't going to target this to get removed, because there's probably way bigger threats out there that need to be removed. Another one that I was thinking about was Bitter Blossom, and there was the new one from Guilds of Ravnica or War of the Spark or something that had where it creates a zombie, and then you Instead of creating another zombie, you just put counters on it.
Dread Horde Invasion.
Okay, so Dread Horde Invasion along with Bitter Blossom. Two mana enchantments that will just straight up spit out creatures for you that you can use to sack to your abilities to draw cards or whatever else you come up with or that you see floating around on the world that would fit this theme of the deck. They also become chump blockers. I mean, worst case scenario, you got just fodder out there that you can block for days and you don't have to worry about it so much.
Yeah, I prefer Bitter Blossom over Dread Horde Invasion just because of the amass token just gets bigger.
It does gain lifelink if it's a 6/6 though or something like that, doesn't it? Or is
True.
it a 4/4?
Whenever a zombie token you control with power 6 or greater attacks, it gains lifelink. So, those zombie tokens you make off of Field of the Dead, if you can buff those somehow too, I guess there's some synergy there.
I like that just because of the free ability to create a token.
Yeah, definitely agree. Free bodies are always nice.
Yep. As for enchantments, that's all that I really have on my list aside from your Phyrexian Arena or any of those type of things. Something along those lines, just something that's going to recurrently give you incremental advantage is what you're looking for. And that's why I pulled out like the Death Touch stuff, because I'm not a fan of that at all. Or the Drain and Gain, because you don't have enough of the theme in there that the one of card I don't think is quite good enough for it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Knowing that we're doing this steal and sacrifice stuff, depending on if you want to be that person, you could go the Grave Pact and Dictate a Erebos route, just because if once you sack an opponent's creature, other opponents now have to sack their stuff too. Clears the board for you, but also you lose all the toys that you want to play with on your next turn.
Yeah, that's true. I think maybe one of them.
Yeah, I was about to say, I would probably run Dictate a Erebos over Grave Pact just because of the flash ability is nice. And to be honest, like, one is enough. Especially because this isn't a Aristocrats deck where you're going to abuse it. It's not Gave, it's not, Torbrand, what's the black one from Kaldheim? Tegrid, there we go.
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely, and I like Dictate 2 over Grave Pact because of the triple black in Grave Pact, since a lot of the deck seems to revolve around more of the red aspect for stealing, like you need that red mana sources. You don't want to be heavy into the black mana sources, per se, so instead of forcing triple black so you can leave some black open for other abilities, then it's just better overall.
Agreed. Okay, if that's all for enchantments, I think that leaves 2 categories left, so let's start with Planeswalkers. We have a deck with Planeswalkers now, Chris.
That's a first.
For us it is,
I think like the last 4 decks we've done, there have been no Planeswalkers in it. So we have one Planeswalker, and that's Sorin Imperious Bloodlord. Sorin is a 2 colorless and a black for 4 loyalty legendary Planeswalker Sorin, who doesn't quite look like Sorin in this picture, which kind of bothers me. But it is what it is. So Sorin's +1 is target creature you control gains Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. If it's a vampire, put a +1/+1 counter on it. The other +1 ability is you may sacrifice a vampire. When you do, Sorin Imperious Bloodlord deals 3 damage to any target and you gain 3 life. And then Sorin's -3 is you may put a vampire creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. All good abilities for a vampire tribal deck.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, Vampire Tribal, that's what that does. Do you have any recommendations for different Planeswalkers, though?
Angrath Flamechained. Like, that was a no-brainer. As soon as I was reading through this deck and how it was supposed to be played, and all that, he likes to steal stuff, Angrath popped in my head immediately. Angrath is 5 mana, comes in with 4 loyalty. The +1 is each opponent discards a card and then loses 2 life. His -3 is gain control of target creature, gains haste. It's an action treason effect. Then if that creature's CMC is 3 or lower, I do believe, then you sacrifice it at the end of turn. And then his -7, I do believe it is.
-8.
-8. Target player, or is it each player loses life equal to the number of cards in their hand? Something like that.
I'm doing
this right off the fly. I'm trying to remember the card off because I play this card.
So the -8 is each opponent loses life equal to the number of cards in their graveyard.
Oh, in their graveyard. Even better.
The -3 is gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap it, it gains haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step if it has a converted mana cost 3 or less.
Yep.
And then you had the +1, perfect.
Yep. So, I mean, very good card. It fits your theme with the negative ability. The plus ability is just going to fit overall because you're forcing people to discard, and they're going to start taking incremental damage. So it is what it is, and it'll draw a target off of you to the Planeswalker. So it comes out, you -3, steal, do some other wacky shenanigans, or sacrifice the creature. then they're going to want to kill Angrath because they don't want that to continuously keep happening. So then that kind of pulls, you save yourself for a turn type of deal is what I always look at it with the Planeswalker.
Yeah, I'm going to jump right on the Angrath train here and recommend a different Angrath with Angrath, Captain of Chaos. This was the uncommon Angrath from War of the Spark. It's 2 hybrid Rakdos, and I'm solely like the static here that says creatures you control have menace.
That was a really good card in draft. Like if you
it was so good in draft,
immediately take it.
If punching through damage is an issue in this deck, giving all your creatures, and these are vampires, some of them are 1/1, some of them are 2/2s, some of them do have some bigger bodies in the 4s and 5s, but, do I really want to assign 2 blockers to block a 1/1 or even a 2/2? No, you're making your opponents pretty much say we don't want to block until it's something that is probably going to kill them.
Yep.
This Angrath also does kind of synergize well with Dreadhorde Invasion that Chris recommended because it's only ability, its -2 ability says amass 2, so you can just add more counters to that invasion token.
Yep, or worst case, you create an amass token, so...
Yep, you create a new one. Yep. And then it does come in with 5 loyalty.
Yep, but it's only got minus loyalty, which was always hard for those Planeswalkers, which I liked because they were uncommons, and it was the War of the Spark, so they're all going to die anyways, because, Nicol Bolas wants them all gone, because he wants to be the only Planeswalker out in the world.
Exactly. Okay. Any other Planeswalkers, Chris?
Not really. Planeswalkers are hard in Rakdos because they all do random different things. Like, you could go in the Liliana train and, go for basic swamps off the one Liliana, or you could do a reanimating Liliana, or something like that. You could look at that, but I don't think it's quite good enough. I don't think the Chandras are quite good enough. Maybe Torch of Defiance to allow you to, uptick to get incremental card advantage, but her other abilities don't fit the theme of your deck. So overall, I think the Angraths are probably the best of them, along with Sorin if you keep it more of a vampire-themed creature deck.
Awesome, yeah, totally agree with you there. So, last but not least, let's talk about the creatures.
We got 24 of these bad Mamma Jammas. We got Blood Cultist, Blood Host, Drana Calastria Bloodchief, Drana the Last Bloodchief, Eldrazi Obligator, Etali Primal Storm, Falconwrath Aristocrat, Falconwrath Exterminator, Falthus Shadowcat Familiar, Gifted Aetherborn, Gonti Lord of Luxury, Havengull Vampire, Ilharg the Razbor, Kalidas Bloodchief of Get, Markov Crusader, Markov Warlord, Murderous Rider, which also has the instant of adventure for Swift End, Null Priest of Oblivion, Priest of the Forgotten Gods, Ravenous Chupacabra, Stormkirk Captain, Twilight Prophet, Vampire Nighthawk, and Vito, Thorn of the Dusk Rose.
It's a lot of vampires and a few non-vampires.
A few of them. The big one that I wanted to bring up right away is Eldrazi Obligator. I love Eldrazi Obligator. Really, really good card. The downfall to this card is that you need a colorless source. It can't be, some random other thing. It has to be something that creates specific colorless to do that, for the special ability when it casts to steal a creature. So that one's kind of an iffy thing on my, list of things because I'm looking at the land base and you have Field of the Dead. And if you don't change it, I think Field of the Dead is the only one in this deck that creates that colorless.
And Soul Ring, I guess, would be the other
Soul
one.
Ring and Talisman, yep, your mana rocks do. But so 3 sources for that 1-of card, I don't think that it's worth it to have it in there because a lot of times all it's going to be is a 3/1 with haste, which is not quite powerful enough for what we're trying to do. Now, if we change it up to actually put in more colorless pips, then this might actually be worth it.
Yeah, I mean, you could easily add the red-black Pain land, and, that'll do it. A lot of the lands we did recommend tap for colorless.
Yes.
So, those, and like he said in his notes, he has the mana base, he just needs to, implement it.
Yeah. Because, I love this card. I love it a lot. I played it in Modern for years. Phenomenal card. But if you don't have that outlet to actually be able to use the ability, it is just a basic generic creature.
Yeah. I would like to talk about 2 of them. First being Ilharg.
Yep.
So Ilharg is a 6/6 with trample, and when it attacks, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking, and then you return it at the beginning of the next end step. And then when Ilharg dies, you put it exiled, you can put it 3 from the top of your library.
Yep.
I don't know, just looking at this list, if there's anything I would want to drop with Ilharg.
I don't think so neither, be honest
I mean,
with you.
there is a Gonti, so you could just loop Gontis, I guess. But like, there isn't some big like Wormcoil or some big nasty vampire. Like the old original Draena, Kalista Bloodchief is good, but you also have to have the mana available to swing in, like activate her ability.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I love Ilharg. I've played against Ilharg decks. I've played Ilharg itself. It's a great card, but I don't know if you have the threats in here to keep it around. Like, yeah, you can drop a Ravenous Chupacabra, but that gets, that just puts a target on your back, to be honest, if you just loop a Ravenous Chupacabra with Ilharg.
I've looped Ravenous Chupacabras before with Alesha, and it's awesome.
Gross. Yes, you have.
No, I agree. Ilharg is not quite where I want to be with this deck. I would rather be playing more efficient creatures, cheaper creatures that do stuff. Now, while Ilharg is a 6/6 trampler for 5, that is really, really efficient mana cost for what it does. The abilities don't quite fit the theme of what we're looking to do. So replacing it with anything else that fits the theme will just make the deck move much smoothly.
Yep. My other one I want to talk about is Falthus. Shadowcat Familiar. This is a 2/2 for 2 and a black, and it has partner, and it says commanders you control have menace and death touch. So you're not running a partner deck, so it's really only helping you unless you take someone else's commander, which could be possible, but a lot of the time people protect their commanders, so they're gonna have hexproof or shroud or something making it a little harder for you to take their commander versus a Thragtusk. That's the first creature that came to the top of my mind. I don't know why. So this is where I would swap for the Angrath that I recommended. Because,
Okay.
yeah, you lose the Death Touch bonus, but giving your whole team menace, even when you steal other people's stuff, I think is just throughout the course of the game, it's going to be better value than just giving commanders you control Death Touch.
Agreed. I agree with that 100%.
And whatever, menace. There we go.
Yep. Yeah, there's a few of them that I was considering. There's 3 of them that popped in my head immediately when I started building this, and this is just like my first outline of how I would do it. Like, I'm not sure like the exact creature base. I didn't want to dig into it too deep per se, because it seems like you like what the vampires are doing. But I would like recurable creatures such as like Bloodghast, Reassembling Skeleton, and Relentless Dead. Abilities to bring them back in one way or another, so you can sack them off again for your value if you can't get your stealing engine running. Because that's the theme with when you're running a stealing engine. If it's not working for you, usually you just start falling flat on your face with your sack outlets, because you got to sack your good creatures, and then it's like, oh, I don't want to do this. So why not have these cheap, efficient ones that can recur that you can just sack repeatedly? Like, I mean, setting up a Reassembling Skeleton with a Vampiric Rites over and over and over again is awesome.
Yep, we've both experienced that with Dana, so that's
sure
fun.
have. That's when it popped in my mind, was right like that.
And there are vampires that have that ability, such as like Oathsworn Vampire. It's 2 mana for a 2/2. It enters tapped, but you can cast it from your graveyard if you gained life this turn.
Yeah, sack it, you gain life off Vampiric Rites. Oh, guess what? I'll cast it again.
And then there's like Silver Smoot Ghoul. This is a newer card. It's a 3/1. And at the beginning of your end step, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, return it from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And it also has an ability for 1 in a black. You can sacrifice it and draw a card.
Yep.
Right there. And it's a vampire. So those are the type of cards I think you're talking about, Chris, is, they can come back if you hit a criteria. And especially with Silver Smoot Ghoul, you get that bonus of just looping it to draw those cards.
Yes.
There are a couple vampires that I would like to see added. One of them being Yahenni Undying Partisan. 3 mana for a 2/2 with haste. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Yahenni. You're already stealing your opponent's stuff and probably sacrificing them to something. Yahenni's just going to get bigger. But it's also a sacrifice outlet, because you can sacrifice a creature and Yahenni gains indestructible until end of turn.
Yes.
So that's what you want to be doing. You act treason something, attack with it, sacrifice it to Yahenni. Yahenni gets bigger.
Agreed. Now, the one card I was surprised not to see in this deck, and it fits the theme so well. It does everything that you need, allows you to prevent recursion from your opponents, gives you incremental advantage when you sacrifice your opponent's creatures, and that is Kalitas, Trader of Get. Kalitas is a 3/4 for 4 mana, colorless and 2 blacks. He has lifelink, and then reads, if a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, Instead, exile that card and put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. Now sacrifice another vampire or zombie, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Kalida's Blood Trader of Get. So if you're killing your opponent's stuff, you get zombie tokens. Now if you're stealing it with Olivia, turning it into a vampire, you sack it to Kalidas, because it's another sack outlet for that, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on Kalidas. Overall, it just fits the criteria what you want to do. Not to mention, Kalidas is a vampire, so it fits into that vampire theme that you have going on. Lifelink on it, I think this card is probably one of the best black cards I've seen in quite a few years for the efficiency of what it does.
Yep, and so I totally agree with you, and I caught myself about Yahenni when you were explaining this card.
Oh boy.
The issue is the opponent has to control it. So if you steal it, it doesn't get bigger. Same with Yahenni. Yahenni, you can still sacrifice it to make Yahenni indestructible, but you were the controller.
Yep. That's the same with Kalidas. I understand that. It's just, if you steal it with Olivia, it's a vampire that you can sack. So it's another sack outlet for that.
Right. Yeah, totally agree.
Worst case scenario, it's still allowing your creature, the creature that your opponents control to get exiled if board wipes go off, or if any of your removal spells kill them, or if you're killing their creatures in combat with other stuff. Anything like that allows you to exile it to create a 2/2 zombie that just, it's just going to give you incremental advantage overall.
Totally agree. But I wanted to make that clear so the internet doesn't yell at us like they did about Mutate.
Did they really?
Wrong. I got it wrong.
Okay. That's
when it dies, they all die. When it dies, they all die in Mutate.
Yep. I asked a judge about that the other day, and he's like, yep, they all die. And I'm like, yeah, internet's going to yell at us. I love it. At least I said I don't know anything about Mutate, so.
There's 5,000 words in that rulebook, so.
Yeah.
The other vampire I think that would be great in this deck is Zagreus, Thief of Heartbeats. This is 4 black, red for a legendary vampire rogue with a 4/4 body. It costs 1 less to cast for each creature in your party. I don't know if that will actually apply in this deck. I just like it because it's a flying Death Touch haste vampire, and it also gives all the other creatures you control Death Touch. And then whenever a creature you control deals damage to a Planeswalker, you destroy the Planeswalker.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, so I like this. It's a little bit of that Death Touch thing that, you can use Olivia to ping, but the fact that you could now swing into Planeswalkers and just kill them, essentially, is great.
Like that a lot. Well, the final one that was on my list overall is Burnished Heart. Not a fancy card. 2/2 for 3 mana. It's an artifact. 3 mana, sacrifice, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them in the battlefield tapped. Just a little bit of ramp. If you decide to go with any sort of recursion in the deck, like the Phyrexian Reclamation. If you try to go with Phyrexian Reclamation or anything like that, it's a nice little recurable thing that you can do with it. That kind of stuff. I just think overall it is a good value engine in black-red where you're missing out on any type of ramp. So it's something to think about.
Okay, so Chris, let's end on some final thoughts about Brian's deck. What are your final thoughts here?
My final thoughts, the deck as it sits needs to be more focused. You need to pick one theme or another and stick to it. The hard part about Rakdos is you can't separate yourself so thin like that because you don't have the pieces to support being thin. Overall, I love the idea of the deck. I never thought about doing this in Rakdos. I always think about it more of like the way that Dana's done it, and that's the fling decks where you steal and fling things. I never thought about it as it being a sack outlet, like steal, sack, get incremental advantage on it. So I like the idea that you have going on here. I love the deck overall because you picked Rakdos. So Max, you can just buzz off now because Rakdos is the best color combination in Magic.
You know what, Chris? I'll let you have that today. Rakdos can be the best color combination today. But yeah, I agree. I think the deck just needs a little more refinement and zoning in on what you want to do. I think the Olivia thing is fun, and I think you can make a deck out of that. I also think, if you're going to do that, you need to go all in on it. You want, play as many of the steel stuff that you already are, but find ways to make it benefit. Like Chris and I have been saying all show, grab the creature, sacrifice it to draw a card, or use your village rights to get rid of your opponent's stuff. I think this is it's going in the right direction. I just think it needs to, be zoned in and figure out what exactly do we want to do.
Exactly. And don't get discouraged when you play this. When you end up going and playing in person with this deck and all that, don't get discouraged because you haven't really been able to play it. So get a lot of games in before you decide to chuck it off to the wayside. So
yeah, 100% agree. But Brian, thank you so much for supporting us on Patreon and sending in your deck. We had a great time looking at it and going over it, and we hope you enjoyed this show. If you want to reach out to us, you can find Dana on Twitter at Dana Roach. You can find me at CMDRCentral_Max, and you can hit Chris up at YSquishy1. You can talk to our editor, Rafael Garcia, on Twitter at Ursa Bearwalker, and our theme song is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. We will be back on Monday with all three of us, probably. Until then, I am Max.
And I'm Chris.